February 6, 2012. We'll go ahead and take the roll call now.
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Roth?
Here.
Commissioner Mumm?
Here.
Commissioner Pauly?
Here.
Mayor Neely?
Here. Would you please join me in the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have the opportunity here to read into a proclamation, and afterwards I'd like to have a couple people come forward and speak to the proclamation. Whereas genital heart disease defects are the most frequently occurring birth defect and leading cause of birth defect-related deaths worldwide, and whereas over 1 million families across America are facing the challenges of hardships of raising children with congenital heart defects, and whereas every year 40,000 babies are born in the United States with congenital heart defects, and whereas some congenital heart defects are not diagnosed until months or years after birth, and whereas undiagnosed and congenital heart conditions may cause sudden cardiac death in young athletes, and whereas despite these statistics, newborn and young athletes are not routinely screened for congenital heart defects, and whereas a disproportionately small amount of funding is available for congenital heart defect research and support, and whereas Congenital Heart Defect Awareness Week provides an opportunity for affected families to celebrate life, remember loved ones lost, honor dedicated health professionals, and raise public awareness about congenital heart defects. Now, therefore, I, Doug Neely, Mayor of Oregon City, hereby proclaim February 7th through 14th, 2013 as Congenital Heart Defect Week Awareness Week. And I'll be signing that. And I'd like, we've got a couple people here that are involved in this. If you come forward and speak.
Here?
Yes. Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Wendy Breedlove, and I'm a longtime resident of Oregon City, and I was born with a congenital heart defect tetralogy of Fallot. When I was born, the mortality rate was very high, and thankfully I'm here today. And my friend Victoria's daughter.
My daughter is Lucilia Love, and she was born with pulmonary stenosis severe, and they went in and did open heart surgery and found out that she had 3 holes in her heart that they could not see through an echo. And she was 5 months when she had that.
And the educating people on this is very important because there is a high mortality rate still of undiagnosed infants not being treated. And we really appreciate what this has done for the community, and we want to thank you all.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You can free to mention something about your book, and I'll have a comment too.
I just wanted to share with everybody, this is what a lot of us families have to go through and face when we are dealing with open heart surgery. And it's very emotional for both sides.
Yes. But we thank you so much.
Well, and it's particularly an area of interest and concern to me because one of our children was born with a heart defect as well, and at that time, a baby would have to be older in order for them to do the operation. We were very lucky to be near Duke University and their hospital there, and they were able to perform it. And she, at the age of 2, she had a heart surgery and very successful, and was able to, live a normal life. But we went through 2 years of major concern, and I appreciate this opportunity actually to read this proclamation.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing your story. Thank you. I had no idea. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
With that, we are open to any citizens' comments from the floor of items that are not on the agenda. At this point, we have David Prideaux and Tom Guile. Would you both please step forward? And you know the shtick, right? You live in Oregon City.
Dave Prideaux, Oregon City. I also am speaking representing a group of interested citizens, and I understand that's been referred to as that little group. And one of the items that was brought up in the Urban Renewal Commission meeting had to do with the follow-up for 3407. And the attorney and city recorder explained to us that the process is that the information has been sent for codification, and that could take a little while. But the attorney assured us that the measure is law. And it has been brought to my attention that one of the things that has to happen in law is that people have to be duly noticed as far as publication. So my question is, has this been published in the newspaper, or is there some kind of official written notice that goes to the community that would have the effect of informing citizens?
Well, I think it's been
When it
everywhere
came
in
to
the
the commission,
newspaper.
and we,
Every
when it
newspaper's
comes to the
carried the
commission, and
story.
If you'd like me to respond specifically, there are a variety of different legal things that have to happen. The most importantly is that the city commission has to proclaim the results of the election, and that's presumed to notify the citizens when the commission's proclamation of the results of the election. And statute sets forth the day it goes into effect, and it's in effect now.
Mm-hmm. So that proclamation has happened?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, somehow I just have to comment. I saw something that quote was attributed to me. I have no idea when I would have said that, and I'd be very curious if anybody can come up with any event where we are filmed, where in fact I made that statement about that little group. I surely don't recall it. And if somebody's going to make that accusation, I hope. I'm not saying you did.
We kind of like the term.
You kind of like. Anyway, I don't recall ever making that statement. Actually, I was quoted as making it.
How rumors go around.
It must be one of those little groups that started it.
That rumor.
But I don't know which one.
Well, probably another one.
We'll just pick one.
Mr. Giles.
Okay, Tom Giles, resident Oregon City. Just wanted a couple things tonight. Wanted to first, I see I got 40 seconds. No, it's up to 3 now. First, I wanted to thank you, the city, the county, the state, or the federal government, whoever helped fund it and put it into effect. The right-hand turn lane, the dedicated right turn lane off Redland onto Holcomb, it really makes a big difference to all those people coming in Redland, coming down from Park Place area. There's a lot of business traffic on 213, but you still now don't have to wait for everyone to turn left, so that is great.
I will tell you that when this thing was in the initial discussions of what was to be done, I recommended that.
He's part of that little
Yeah, I know when I first moved here, that was one of my first thoughts. I thought, why don't they have something that... So I'm glad you said it too, but it's just great to see that in action now, and it's really made a big difference.
I do remember saying that.
Does somebody have a quote with him saying that? Secondly, I wanted to give you a kind of a progress report on the CIC, the Citizens Involvement Council, where we are at this point. We're moving forward in a very positive manner. I'm really pleased to report that. We had in the beginning, we had a few resignations, but the negativity has recited. We're moving forward as a very cohesive team. Everyone's working together to make everything work properly. We, in the first meeting in January, we appointed a nominating committee. This last Monday, we met again and gave them direction on what they need to do and how to take those nominations. We still have the vice chair and secretary in place from the previous election, and I had them stay in place until we could decide what we were going to do. But we do have a nominating committee that will bring nominations to the next meeting, and then in April they will vote and elect their next leaders. That's number one. We also, at the last meeting, appointed a CIC bylaw review committee to go over those bylaws word by word, letter by letter. And while we don't like to have rules where they're so strictly drawn out, we realize that sometimes people can construe those bylaws or may take them in a different meeting, so we want to be very specific. And that will be the job of that committee. I'm just interim moderator. I'm not involved in that. We've appointed committees of people to take care of it for the future of what CIC will be. So all in all, we're submitting a very positive, goal-minded team approach. They're working together really well, and it's a CIC you're all going to be proud of. It's going to be great. And I wanted to thank the mayor for originally suggesting, and all of you for allowing the CIC to move forward in the plan of what you suggested. And they accepted me at the first meeting to do that for them and lead it. I also wanted to thank Bill Kweisman for all his advice, for being there at the first meeting and helping guide it. That really meant a lot to all of us, especially me, because I didn't know what the heck was going to happen that first meeting. And lastly, we also wanted to thank Nancy I for coming to the meeting this week. And while it wasn't pleasantly accepted, she explained about the insurance situation, and I'm sure you'll probably hear more about that someday from those people on the CIC. But mainly, I just wanted to tell you things are working out fine. It's smoothed out, and we really appreciate your patience. And you're going to have a good group of people working together.
I was curious as to whether every one of the neighborhood association now has their designated two people to the CIC.
I'm sorry, that was part of one of my notes here. We have asked each neighborhood that are participating. One has apparently dropped out with one of those resignation, and we have not heard from them. So we've asked each of those to bring in their credentials, and several of them have, of if they were nominated or appointed or however they were chosen, and those will be kept on file. By doing some research, we found out that the role of the secretary is actually to maintain that for any. We looked at chambers, we looked at Rotary, we looked at all the different nonprofits and all these different groups, and a secretary should keep those. But we've also suggested, Stephen, Amy, and I have talked about there should probably be a parliamentarian too, to if they're busy doing something, someone who can check the bylaws and always have those with them at the meetings to know this is what the procedures are. And again, we hate to be that specific, but with what's happened in the past and a couple incidents, we feel it's best to be on point rather than behind the scene.
Well, thank you.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you for helping us.
Thanks for the update.
Amber Holbeck.
Good evening, Mayor and City Commissioners. I'm Amber Holbeck, Executive Director for the Oregon City Chamber. And tonight I'm just here to share. Today I had the honor of gathering with probably a couple hundred people to celebrate the life of one of Oregon City's business people. His name's Mike McCarroll and was owner of Minuteman Press located on Molalla Avenue. I want to share this because unless you talk to him about his residence, you'd never know he wasn't an Oregon City resident. Mm-hmm. In fact, he lived in Beaverton and made that commute sometimes multiple times during the day. The reason we kind of thought he just belonged here in Oregon City is he was a...
Breathe.
He was a small business owner involved in our Oregon City Lions Club, in our Rotary Club, dedicated to Angels in the Outfield, attended every fundraiser known unto man here in Oregon City, active in the Oregon City Chamber of Commerce as our 2012 board chair. So I got to work very closely with him. And while he was in the hospital for his heart bypass surgery, the Chamber had named him 2012 Business Leader of the Year, which will probably now become the McCarroll Award, or Mike McCarroll Award for the future. Because he left a lasting mark on us in Oregon City, I think there's a group of us who are creating efforts to really pay it forward in his name. And I know that I had an opportunity to talk with the mayor and our city manager today, and there's a number of business people who really want to let folks know how much of an impact he made on Oregon City, even though he was here only since 2009. So it's a great loss to the business community, but this is the kind of story that convinces me that if each one of us do just a little bit more, like Mike chose to take on, Oregon City, nobody can stop us. So that's all I had to share. Thank you.
Maybe I missed
Thank
it,
you.
Amber.
Thank you.
I believe the
We will
chamber
miss him.
recognized him then at the dinner as the business.
He was the business leader of the year
Yes.
for 2012.
He. I
And he was
had
a lion, too. Did you mention
Yeah.
that?
Yes,
Yeah.
a Lion, Rotarian. Yep.
Rotary.
He will be dearly missed.
I had the recognition. He went into hospital that very day of the of the chamber dinner.
He was supposed to play several roles in the chamber dinner, which was on January 26th. He called me that Thursday before saying that, Amber, I'm having open heart surgery the next day.
Yeah.
So he was in on that Thursday. The surgery was on Friday, and the event was on Saturday.
About a week before, he was there was a what was the chamber? This is silly. North Chamber, North Clackamas Chamber of Commerce had a event for people to come and meet elected officials elected throughout the county, and he was there, and I saw him and I says, "Well, you're at all these things in Clackamas County, and you live in Washington County." And he said, "Well, yes, that's true." He says, "But I pay a lot of taxes in Clackamas County." And the point is, he did a lot more than pay taxes in Clackamas County. He this was his. I regard this as being his second home in terms of his commitment to the community. It's been tremendous, and there are various business people, of course, who make tremendous contributions, but his contributions, they were phenomenal. I agree with you.
Thank you.
We'll go on to the remainder of most of our agenda, and we'll ask, I believe, if go ahead and for the adoption of the agenda, is there anything that needs to be pulled from the consent agenda? Hearing nothing, we'll go into public hearings. Resolution 1302, submitting a measure amending Section 58 of the Oregon City Charter requiring water rates to the electors of Oregon City. And we'll start with the staff report.
Thank you, Mayor and City Commissioners, for one more meeting for the water rate charter amendment. This is what we're here to talk to you about is Section 58 of the Charter. We've been to you many times before, and our schedule has continued to show that February 6th is an important date. And you all remember Eli DeBerry?
Yes. Hi, Eli.
Have we named the pipe yet?
Pipe guy. Rusty.
I think that's perfect.
Joan, I'm not wearing that around my neck.
Not to overemphasize the problem, but part of our problem is old water pipes. And so Eli's been pretty good about reminding me that we need to show those pipes.
Yes.
And so I appreciated him bringing those, but that's kind of what we're here to talk to you about. And we're here to talk to you about the Section 58. If you remember Section 58 of our charter, I'm not going to read it, but it basically returns our water rates to 1994 levels. And it limits our ability to raise water rates by to 3% maximum per year. So we've been before you for over a year now talking about water rates and talking about this water rate issue and how our funding needs for water rates are continuing to be present. And with this water rate rollback, the concern is what that impact will have on our ability to collect rates and pay for infrastructure, pay for operations. So when in January 2012 we brought to you our water system master plan, I would say prior to that we knew we've been looking at this charter amendment and this kind of deadline in 2014 when the water rates would roll back. So we've been doing a lot of work over the last year and coming before you many times. And so what we wanted to do today was just kind of go over this Resolution 1302, which is in draft form. It's definitely up for discussion. I suspect there are people in the audience that want to talk more about that as well. Basically, though, the resolution that we're proposing eliminates the rollback provision and reestablishes rates to at least their current rate. And we also want to talk, the resolution is drafted and presented today, talks about setting the rate maximum to a new higher rate so that we can afford to pay for some of these broken pipes. So some of the things that we've done to date is a variety of meetings, as I've said. We've hired a financial consultant that help to look at some of our rate needs, FCS group. We've hired a consultant to help us with public outreach, so there's been a fair amount of public information that's been provided and will continue to be available for use. We appointed a water rate advisory group and held at least 3 meetings, thinking 3 meetings with the water rate advisory group, and then several of them have testified before you. And we also conducted some opinion polls. And we've done a phone survey and an online survey using DHM Research, which is a firm well known for public opinion polls. So as we've continued to talk through this this resolution and the ballot title and the ballot measure, we feel like what we're hearing from the City Commission is something between elimination of the rollback and a rate increase that would take our rates from the ability to raise 3% per year to something between 6 and 8%. We've heard those numbers from each of you, and as well as from the community. So we have the resolution. I think, Alita, would you mind pulling it up on the computer? We've got the resolution to share. We weren't, other than the pipe display, we weren't planning on much of a presentation. It's a public hearing. We've consistent with what we've shown you in the past, but we recognize that there may be some discussion that you want to have about whether what we brought you in terms of an example is the right thing to have, and then if it is, what's the right rate to fill in the blanks with. And Bill, do you want to go over the resolution and about language at all, or?
I certainly can. It seems fairly straightforward. Would you like me to, or?
So you've seen this information. I think the piece that's kind of most helpful is the ballot title, Exhibit A. So maybe you can flip to that, Alita.
This would be what would show up in the voters' pamphlet that people would see. And there are strict word limitations on the various pieces. The caption is limited to 10 words, the question 20 words, and the summary 175. I think there's a little more room on everything except for the question, but not much. And it's a question of how best to explain it in simple, as Commissioner Mumm said in the Urban Renewal meeting, in layman's terms.
Yes.
And we tried our best to do that.
So at this point, I don't know if anybody's filled out any forms to speak. You're going to have to help me through the public hearing process.
Let me just ask initially if there are any questions that the Commission has. I have one. I know the courts have ruled in terms of state initiatives it can only be one item per initiative. Does that apply to city charter initiatives as well, or do you know?
Two responses to that. Generally, that limitation was driven out of a case involving Measure 11, Armada versus Kitzhaber. If you remember, Measure 11 was the increased sentences for a number of property crimes, and in the Armada decision, the court said you've got to vote on these things separately. More recently, there was another case that brought this up, and I'm blanking on the name of it, but essentially that relaxed the single subject rule somewhat so that concern isn't quite as much. I think if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would have said you're going to have 2 different measures because you're dealing with both the rollback and the rate limitation. Now I do think you can combine them based on that case whose name, again, is escaping me.
But we could do two different measures on this. We could do rollback on one and rate on the other, correct?
Yes, you can, and I'd want to have the commission think through, is there a, sometimes you have, when you change a single provision and have two different options to make sure they don't conflict, I don't think
Yeah.
they do, but just want to think through that, and I think the answer is, I don't think so, but just want to make sure we've talked about it. Do we want one to prevail over the other, or both if they're both adopted? Or
So I guess what's the negative side to having two or
One passes and one doesn't.
Well, yes.
That would be a problem.
The difficulty I would see in terms of having just a rollback provision, say that passed and the 6% didn't,
Right.
the commission would have the authority to set any rate they wanted. And so that's a little bit, that's a little bit dicey.
Oh, I hadn't thought of it like that.
Because, it almost sounds like you're putting up something there that's kind of circumventing the wish of the people when they originally put it in there.
Right.
And so that's I think that's one challenge to actually separating the rollback completely from the increase.
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of
Well,
go ahead.
I have a question on the second to the last paragraph where it says water rates would revert to lower levels. Is there a reason why it doesn't say 1994 levels?
Because, and this is part of the when the 1996 litigation occurred, it was really about protecting the bond payers, and the court, they didn't raise a question the court didn't look at. So what happens when the bonds are paid off? And our best guess as to what it is that those rates would be the 94 levels plus the 3% that is
Each year,
increased
right.
when the city has done that. So it's not exactly the 94 levels. It's 94 levels plus the increased amount that.
But could it say approximately? I just don't feel it's very specific. It doesn't really, somebody who's reading it for the first time, I mean, I know there's enough information out there, so that's good too, but that's one thing that caught my attention.
You're right, and we looked at that when we were putting it together, and the difficulty we had was the complexity of explaining it with the limitations on space.
Right.
And we can take another run at it if we need to put that in there, but it's tough because it's not a simple 94 rates. That would be far easier.
I'm looking at this a little bit differently. I'm seeing if we say we're going to eliminate the rollback, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're negating the vote of the people. I'm looking at that sentence, just the rollback just specifically, and taking it back to that and not taking out this other part that was in the 96 resolution.
But does this replace what's in there, though?
You can do it in a variety of different ways. What the way it's currently before you is to amend Section 58. And if you look at the first page of the resolution, it sort of sets out what the commission is intending to do with these changes. And so I could envision, two measures. One that would delete that first sentence that says, upon passage of this amendment, the city charter water rate shall be those in effect October 31, 1994. And that would eliminate the rollback, leaving the other piece with the 3% limitation in place. And also, alternatively, if that rollback was rejected, you could have the percentage changed. And leave the percentage change at more than 3%, but with the rates having been rolled back.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, let's go ahead with citizen comments and we can do our deliberation.
Yeah.
Sorry for doing it this way, but I knew that we all had some questions that maybe are things that want to speak, that citizens want to speak to as well. So with that, Kevin Hunt and Dave Perdue, please come forward.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Kevin Hunt, I live in Oregon City. First, just a correction or clarification. The case of Armada versus Kitzhaber, which was followed by Lehman versus Bradbury and State versus Dayton Rogers, did not deal with the same constitutional provision that applies here with single subject. They dealt with a completely different provision, which is Article 17, Section 1 of the Oregon Constitution, which requires that if more than one substantive change to the Oregon Constitution is submitted to the people, each has to be submitted separately. The reason I know this is I'm the one who argued State versus Rogers, and it was just decided a few months ago by the Oregon Supreme Court. With regard to submission of this ballot measure, it's clear that the 1996 Charter Amendment was very myopic and that it didn't take into account the obvious problem of violating the constitutional prohibition against impairing the obligation of existing contracts. I believe Mr. Kabizman has very well stated what the likely result is, that when the bondholders are paid off, you're going to go back to 1994 rates plus whatever 3% increases you've made. I respectfully disagree with the city recorder's opinion that the measure complies with Article 4, Section 1(2)(d) of the Oregon Constitution regarding same subject matter, but I will concede that it's a very close issue. My concern, however, is this. I think we can all agree it will be disastrous if the rollback takes place and there's no way to mitigate it. But what we have here is log rolling any way you look at it. And by combining the rollback with the change allowing the city without a public vote to raise rates by as much as 8%, I fear that you are going to guarantee that this measure is going to go down to a crushing defeat given the current mindset of the public. For that reason, I would strongly urge you to divide this measure into two separate ballot issues, one which would repeal the provision of Section 58 of the Charter requiring the rollback, and a second one which asks the public whether or not the percentage of increase that's permitted without a vote of the people should be increased. I think it'd be very easy to persuade the public, especially with this kind of exhibit, that the 150 plus years of inexcusable deferred maintenance of the city's water distribution system necessitates that we don't roll back the rates. Thank goodness the city is on top of this now after so long. However, that is placed in great jeopardy by increasing the 3% to 6 or 8% without a vote of the people. That's just the mindset people have. It would be possible, and then if you have to raise it more than 3%, again, possibly with this kind of demonstrative evidence, you should be, if it's a good case made for it, you should be able to persuade the public to do that. But I just fear that you're setting yourself up for failure by log rolling in this way. So I would ask you to divide the measure into two questions.
Thank you.
David.
Dave Prideaux, Oregon City. I pretty much was going to say the same things that Mr. Hunt said, but that's good because I'll have time left over when I'm done here. I just have two things to add. I was going to speak to the point that you just spoke to, and there's an additional thought in this that has been brought up here. Commissioner Pauly mentioned that it might not be specific enough the way it is so people can understand, and you refer to it as complex and not simple. And I think if you were to divide the question, there would be a value of simplicity there. It's, if I'm a voter and I don't know anything about this, and I look at that and I'm going to mark my ballot, if it's two separate things, even though they're closely related, it's easier to kind of make sense out of what's going on here. And then finally, I just want to, I did a little research on how dividing the question works with parliamentary procedure and Robert's Rules of Order. And I'm going to pass this out to you folks here, but under history, kind of 2/3 of the way down the page here, it says in the British Parliament, if members seem to be for one part or not for another, that's a good indication that maybe it makes sense to divide rather than to keep it as a unified. And there's a little more information here, which kind of explains how the parliamentary history has been on questions like this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
William Gifford.
My name is William Gifford, and I live in Oregon City. Another point came up, but first I want to reinforce Commissioner Pauly's comment about the fact that it seems to me is just saying lower rates is possibly not as clear as it could be, and council has advised that they could possibly take another run at it, I believe was the phrase, and it sounds like a good thing to take another run at, because if this isn't as crystal clear as possible. The other thing I wanted to point out is that, I should finish that sentence, if it isn't crystal clear, it's not going to happen. On the ballot title, and I know that it's so easy to get caught up into a situation and have difficulty backing off and getting a fresh perspective on it. But I would like to look at the question, and the question says, shall the limitation on water rate increases be changed and the rollback be eliminated? Thank you very much. Shall the limitation on water rate increases be changed and the rollback be eliminated? And I would just contend that there will be a lot of voters, no matter how much public outreach you've done, that are not going to be familiar with this issue. And the phrase, the rollback, to me is not as clear as just saying a charter rollback. Just the wording of a rollback. To say the rollback assumes that the voters know what that is. And it really hasn't been referenced. So it's like an unprecedented pronoun, or not a pronoun, but it's an unprecedented comment that just says the rollback. And I just suggest that you take a harder look at the phrasing on that, and just, even if you said a current rollback scheme or something, would be better than the rollback.
Probably not the word scheme.
Yeah. Let's keep that word out.
The plan, yeah, that one slipped out. Perhaps something, I'm not going to say the words for you, but possibly something like the current charter rollback provision or something like that, other than just the rollback, because this is obviously written from our perspective, us being that have been involved in all of this, and we're very familiar with what the rollback is all about. But there will be other voters that are reading this pamphlet, and it'll be the first time it's on their radar.
Thank you. I think we have a couple more people signed up. Mr. Kabizman, one thing is you might be able to be specific in the rollback to 1990
rates.
For rates, and that becomes
that
clarifies it perhaps.
Yeah, and part of it is also, typically, it's easier. What you've got to do is make very, very tight word limits up front, and then the explanation below.
Right.
And so but certainly anything we can do to make it clearer, we can do.
Adding to the argument, split them, then you have more space to clarify them.
Because there will be an explanatory statement.
For each.
Right, for each.
Do we have to use the word rollback at all?
No.
Can we say just revert? Or
1994 rates.
Yeah. James Nocita.
Hi, James Nocita, Oregon City. I'd like to also voice support for the idea of splitting this into two separate ballot measures. Here, my perspective on this comes from having just spent a lot of time over the past years in getting Measure 3407 on the ballot, getting out and knocking on doors, getting signatures, and a lot of work that it takes. And there's whether it was I don't know if this was a referendum or an initiative back in the 90s to get this on the ballot. But these kind of campaigns take a lot of work, and there's a lot of faith in people who work for something like achieving the right to vote. And I don't know how people would react to being asked to cede that right to vote once they've worked very hard to achieve it. And so that there's a little bit of a political as well as a fiscal issue regarding the second part of this. I got the nice flyer in the mail with the red maps or the red lines and the blue lines. I'm in the McLaughlin neighborhood, and my street is one of the red lines. And
red, lots of red.
I'm quite sure my street looks like what's in that cart. So I can hear a good argument and be very receptive to a good argument on the rollback. On the right to vote aspect, I think making the upper rate limit higher could be perceived by some citizens as a veiled repeal of the right to vote, because it would likely negate ever having to go to the citizens to ask for a rate increase if initially the rate increases or the upper limit is so much higher. So if people react negatively to that and it's not separated out, you could have people who otherwise would be favorably disposed to passing the rollback. We could have that sink because of people's reactions to the second issue. So in that case, irrespective of the legal question, I think from a political and strategic matter, it'd be wise to separate out the two questions. Who knows, with a good case, you might get both to pass, but I think if they're linked, you get a higher statistical risk of having the whole ship sink because people don't like one or the other, and then vote no on both issues because of that. So I would support also splitting the measure out. Thanks.
Paul Edgar.
Thank you, Commission. I'm Paul Edgar from Oregon City. I, too, recognize that, and I think that Carol is correct, that this should be separated into two separate identified issues. And I think that this wording problem here is true. I'm not. There's something about the wording here that makes me uneasy in the sense of saying that it's a difficult read, and whenever it becomes there's any degree of difficulty in it, it's going to be perceived negatively. And I would suggest if it was maybe the term resetting the water rates to what they are currently, but not to 1996 or something, but to effectively setting them what we have today, resetting them back, or eliminating a condition that would cause that would. But I just want to use reset or something to keep it to something, but it's got to be palatable. And I am very concerned with this percentage that we put into here, because the percentage under today's conditions, which I'm going to echo what others have said, are not good. And that I think that, first of all, if we solve the one problem of saying that we eliminate the rollback, that's fine. But if we get too greedy here, maybe it was Kevin that said that 8% or 6%, but there is a breaking point and where that can go down. And if the two are tied together, then it would be catastrophic. But even if the amount of the percentage, and in my mind, I believe that 5% is probably about the high line that people could put their arms around it, much like what we have in Westland and other communities. And when we get into this, it's kind of like we want to win, not put something up there that's going to create an opportunity that's going to be an embarrassment and bring us down. So I think common sense has got to come into play here in making sure that you don't ask for more than what the electorate's going to approve. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't believe, let me just go back here and see. We don't have any other speakers, so now is our opportunity to deliberate.
Can we, at what point can we kind of add something to this, I guess?
Oh, well, you could do that.
The good thing, I continue to hear in conversations that we've just heard tonight and in other places that people recognize the need and they don't necessarily see a rate increase as being off the table. So that's good news. I do worry about the people feeling like they voted on a water rate issue and they passed one. We thought that was going to solve your problem, but I also get the fact that adding a rate increase leaves you with the potential for failure on the rollback. So I hope there's as much interest in helping the city come together on an issue, because we've always talked about the fact that it would be we have to have unanimous decision, at least on the commission level, but it would be great to have that on the community as well, to rally around this water rate issue. And whether that's a 6% rate or an 8% rate, we've got a lot of this in the ground. And if all that passes is the charter amendment, we're going to continue to do what we do. And from what I remember, we would have the ability to continue to operate the system and be responsive, but we don't have much of anything, and that drops off fairly quickly based on the price of doing business. It drops off pretty quickly before we're ever going to have any funding to do capital. And I think the community expects that. It still expects capital improvements to happen. And if you've seen the numbers, that won't happen if we don't have a rate increase in addition to the water rate rollback. So, I mean, I hear this right to vote thing. I mean that. I think they're getting to do that, but with this kind of a ballot title and ballot initiative, we've looked at the other options, and we actually have some language that we could share with you on that. It's very similar to what we're talking about, because we've heard that. Mm-hmm. But it's not a recommendation, because it also feels like it's not that complicated, and a lot of our voters, we think, will get it, especially if we can rally all the groups. Even the little group. The little group.
That little group.
We need that little group.
The little people.
To help all the other groups. So, wouldn't it be great if all of them could unite and maybe pass two ballot measures, I guess. But that's different, I would say, than what we've been talking about for the last several months. And it is a last-minute change that is hard to swallow from staff's perspective.
Commissioner Mum.
I do understand it feels like the 11th hour and we're pulling the rug out from under you, John, but I think that we can work through this. When I campaigned in 2010, I talked about the water rate rollback. Nobody else was speaking to it, so I'm very well aware of this issue. And I do think that we could, I know it's going to be more work for our attorney, but I do think that if we have a chance to put it in two measures, and the rollback does pass, and the fee part does not, we still have the opportunity to go back in November and ask for the fee part. It's because this does not take effect until 2014, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I do think that we have a little breathing room, not a lot, but a little. just my thought. And I wouldn't go any higher than 6%. That's what I've said all along.
With that, I saw Kirapali briefly. Are you still here? Or on
It may have already been said. We'll see.
Okay.
Further. Yeah.
There was a little bit of confusion up here every time I was doing my request to speak.
thought I saw Kathy.
Kathy Roth's name was coming up, and then she'd withdraw it, and I. But we got that one straightened out, and I'm me, and I'm no longer President Roth. Anyway, I mean, I have no problem at all with putting the rate issue and the rollback issue separately, as long as it's clear that in the rollback issue we are only referring to the rollback, and should that pass and the whatever we agree to on the second issue doesn't, it's understood that the current rate would still apply even though the rollback went away.
Yeah, we want to make it clear that if the rollback goes away and the percentage limitation stays the same, we stay at current rates.
Right.
It just can only be increased 3%.
So if that's not an issue,
Right.
then I don't have any problem with the notion of having two separate referendums on the ballot.
Although I know it's more work. I get it. And it is the 11th hour, and we've been talking about it for months and months and months.
Okay, I put my name back up.
Okay, Mr. Pauly.
So if there were two separate ballot measures, would that give them more time to explain about the deferred maintenance on the percentage? Because I think the complexity of this issue is that there's a political part, of wanting to make sure that it doesn't feel like, the voters weren't listened to the first time. And the other part, the practical part of making sure that that deferred maintenance doesn't really bite us and we have a major failure, which would be even more expensive, trying to do the right thing and make sure that we maintain our system. So there are those two parts, and it's like, how do we make them balance out so that we do the right thing, but the voters understand what is being done? So would two measures help with that, perhaps?
I caught something about timing here. I'm assuming if we had two measures, they would still go to the May election.
Yes, May.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
I'm not sure that there'd be more time to explain them. Might be more words to explain them. I guess we'd have a few more words.
On the actual ballot.
Right.
And I might, one of the difficulties, the persuasion about why this measure should be approved is not something that goes into the ballot title. It's supposed to be a dispassionate, neutral, here's what it does.
Right.
The explanation of, we've got this deferred maintenance and, we're going to get a much better water system. The water system's going to fall apart if you don't pass it. Those types of things aren't allowed to be in the ballot title, and that's not city employee type things. I think
I was just thinking of facts.
Right.
Like the numbers. I mean, that's what I'm going by, is just the facts, the numbers, and when things have to be replaced before they fail.
Okay.
Can I just make one more comment, too? Not that I just want everybody to be aware of this. Oh, thank you.
Betty, move.
I know that I brought this up at a meeting that Commissioner Roth and I were at with David, John, and Alita talking about this. I just want everybody to be aware of the fact that also on the May ballot will be the CRW recall board members, which can be confusing because...
It won't be for Oregon City builders.
But as John can tell you from his surveys, our residents don't know where our water comes from. A lot of them think it comes from Clackamas River water. And I have gotten myself emails about, why are you fighting on the board? Stop fighting. It's not our board, but it's confusing. So that's going to add just another layer of confusion to what we're asking for.
Right. Yeah, my apologies for
So I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that, too.
I was just going to ask, just quickly, do we have consensus at this point that we would like to have two separate measures? And if so, then we can get into the maybe nitty-gritty of it all. So is there consensus that we're going for two different measures?
I would be fine with that, yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
we don't have to vote on it. So we can then go into the specifics then. And then with that, Commissioner Smith.
And we haven't been talking about splitting it, and so I think that is a change. But I think a lot of things have changed in the city in the last couple months, and our goal is that we want to see this pass. If we're hearing from the citizens that that's not going to happen by going forward with the way we are, and I think with our SDC situation and all the other things that have gone on, this is going to be a tough sell, and we know that. It's much tougher than it was even maybe a month or two when we were discussing this, and so I lean towards the splitting of it too. I think possibly that gives us a little bit of flexibility in space to define those specific things even more, because you're not sharing the same wording limitations, etc. So I think things have changed in the city enough that we have to really look at what happens if this doesn't pass. We don't have that option. We have to deal with the water rate rollback issue, and so whatever it's going to take for us to get it, and if we need to get everyone on board, this is probably the way we're going to have to do it.
Mr. Frazier.
I think part of the reason the commission started off by looking at this as one measure is because Section 58 is essentially one measure.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
got
Yeah.
one measure with a two-pronged problem, one being the capital limitation on trying to address that, and the other one being the rates. I rather like the idea of having the two separate measures because I think it will be, in many ways, simpler for people to grasp and understand the consequences. I'm not a political expert, so I can't tell you. I know there's a train of thought that says when there's two water measures, people tend to vote for one and against the other because they don't want to say yes to everything. So I just don't know how that's going to. I think the informed voter is likely to read both of them carefully, and you've got a two-pronged problem. One is the rollback is sort of like the biggest problem, and the second one is really targeted more toward repairing these pipes. That's the capital need. And I think about what West Lynn right now is doing, this big, rather enormous one-time increase, which to me is very much just like a bond measure. It's a capital bond measure to fix things that really aren't, well, they're capital needs, but they're deferred maintenance. And maintenance really should be factored into your rates if you want your system to be healthy long-term fiscally and, I think, in the ground. So I think that splitting in some ways gives the city and the community an opportunity to have a more informed, thoughtful process about how to solve this problem, because it's a two-part problem.
Yes.
And the capital need is one that's very specific, and it's kind of powerful on its own argument. And if you solve half the problem by getting rid of the rollback, and let's say you play this forward and one passes and one doesn't, you can still solve half of the problem because you've got two halves to it.
I'm going to see. I mean, I think the one measure is fairly clear. We're going to have wording that works on the rollback itself, however it's phrased. I would like maybe direct our attention then to the rate measure. I guess I'll just lead off on the discussion to. We were given. At our request, we're given 20-year horizons. Initially, we're given 10-year horizons. We're given 20-year horizons. The 6% appeared to nearly deal with the deferred maintenance over a 20-year period. A lower rate would probably do it, but cumulative interest and so forth required to do things that you just don't simply divide the 20 by the 6 and figure out what you get for 5. I mean, you're going to lose, it's going to take you longer than an additional 4 or 5 years to do it, just simply because of the cumulative interest that would be there. And I guess I would just simply argue for the 6%.
Yeah.
But it would be nice if we could, in fact, all agree on the rate and vote unanimously on whatever it might be.
On the screen, because we did meet with Commissioner Mumm and Commissioner Roth earlier, and kind of got an indication that this was something that they were going to advocate for. We asked our attorney to draft the split idea, so that's what this is before you, and we've also got one for the rates. So you've twisted our arm, I suppose.
Yes, we did.
Good job, Eddie.
Yes, thank you.
So Alita's going to pull that up on the screen.
Wow.
Are these the two different ones, Alita, or let's see? No, this is still the.
Thank you for thinking ahead.
Coming back to, if I might, coming back to Mr. Gifford's comments, I think the rollback should probably be described a little bit better, and I would suggest 2 1994 levels. I think people, if they think about that long period of time, that there probably is a little bit more clout to it, taking something back essentially 20 years.
Yeah.
So get a little bit more specific on that ballot title.
Really wear your eyes out now here.
Yeah. Lots of work.
You're like me, I spend about 20 minutes sometimes playing with stuff and not really doing anything constructive because I'm just changing the sizes and so forth.
I think that was a compliment, Alita.
No, it wasn't. Don't do like I do.
Okay, so the one on your left is the rollback, and the one on your right is the percent. And it's another piece that makes me feel a little uncomfortable, but this one, the other thing we talked a little bit about was the whether the percentage should include a maximum and a minimum, and the thought being that was confusing as well, so this just shows a maximum. And I'm assuming annually we have to then come before the commission for a rate increase with another resolution, or
As with any other rate, you know, if you want to increase it, the city commission sets the rate.
Right, because we talked about it, instead of putting 3%, just take and go up to, increase up to 6%. Take the 3% out.
Sure. The manager pointed out that the commission could adopt a water rate schedule for the next 5 years or something. You wouldn't actually have to come back every year.
I would suggest on the ballot title dealing with a rate limitation, since especially is to actually say in the first sentence their increase in water rates from 3% to no more than blank percent.
Right.
To actually build that into the, you bring it up later, but I think it should be to no more than blank percent.
And I'm saying 6%, no more than 6.
Yeah, and I would get rid of the part about this measure would not affect the water rollback rates. I would just take that whole thing
Yeah,
out.
I would too.
And one of the good things about writing this on the computer is that you get to play. You can do the word count easily, and we've got to pay attention to that fairly closely. And so when you use a phrase like "no more than," in the caption, you know, you've used 30% of your almost 30%.
The suggestion is to actually you're going to clobber the last sentence on that one.
So if we're going to wordsmith them here, let's take them one at a time. Make sure.
Okay.
So the water rate limitation, the percentage. Work on that one first.
From in the first sentence of the second paragraph, from 3% to no more than 6%.
Right.
Okay.
And the suggestion, I guess, is really drop everything else.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yeah. Because we don't need to say it again.
We don't need to say it again at the last sentence, and these are independent. Since these are independent ballot measures at this point, they make them distinct and independent. You're not making a reference to that. Second, this measure would not affect the water rollback rates.
If you look above the first paragraph of the summary, specifically identifies Section 58 and says there are two parts to it.
Yeah.
We could leave that as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just suggesting maybe the last two sentences of the second paragraph could be totally eliminated. And let me see if I can.
Mr. Mayor, could there be any more public comment with regard to that?
There can be. Yeah, let's. You can always delete. Well, let's have our deliberation up here first, and if we need to do some additional wordsmithing after public comments, that's fine. But we're suggesting that whole last sentence be removed.
Everything from
I'll
this
leave that.
measure on, what says this measure would not affect, all of that goes away.
Going up further.
Up further.
Kill the sentence before it, too. This
I don't know,
measure.
what do you think?
Right after percent.
Yeah, right after where you put the correction to 6%, take everything from there on out.
Everything else.
Right at the bottom.
No, at the
No.
top, where you just
This-
wrote in the red 6%.
This, no.
Next sentence,
over
right there. Everything else goes.
Take it all out.
And then if you have an argument why it has to be in there, you can make it.
All the way down to the
All
bottom.
the way, because it's just
Oh,
referring back to the 6%.
Right.
Whole thing.
Let me suggest an amendment to the first part of the summary when that's done.
Okay.
So that it says,
Yes.
because right now we talk about two parts.
Yeah.
And if we're not going to discuss it later, maybe better to eliminate it entirely and say Section 58 of the Oregon City Charter contains a limitation on the increase of water rates, or maybe Section 58 of the Oregon City Charter contains a limitation or limits the ability of the city to increase water rates to 3% per year.
No
Or
more than 3%.
No more than 3%
Yeah.
a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then get rid of that second sentence.
If we're not going to mess with it.
Right after the
Do
word
we-
charter.
Section 58 of the Oregon City Charter limits.
Yeah, I wrote it down.
Okay.
We'll work on that.
I don't know, does that make sense?
I think so. Well, we'll see. We'll wait for her to type it in, but I think it does.
I don't know.
More than.
No more than 3%.
6.
Yeah.
Get rid of everything else.
Everything else of the period.
It's pretty straightforward.
I would. It says Section 58 of the Oregon City Charter limits the ability of the city to water rate increases to no more than
Yeah, that's
to
it.
increase water rates. So limits the ability of the city to increase water rates.
To increase water rates, yeah, rather than.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So do we need that at all? Can we just eliminate that part, or do we need the history there?
Well, I think we need the history. of
Yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
An S in there, Alita, by rate.
What's not right?
What's the ability of the city to increase?
As the commission say that is to be all right, if so, I'll just invite public comment on this particular ballot title.
It's Kevin Hunt.
Just a minute.
I'm
Just a
sorry.
minute. We're still seeing if there's something else we want to do before we open the comment.
I don't know.
What do you don't like about it?
Maybe.
What's the ability
No.
of the city to...
Yeah, I guess that's okay. Okay.
With that, we'll go ahead and open up. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, now, Mr. Hunt, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kevin Hunt, Oregon City. I think the language you have there, I think that sentence is awkward. I think it would read better if it said simply Section 58 of the Oregon City Charter limits water rate increases to no more than 3%. However, I believe that's an inaccurate statement. That's not what the Section 58 does. It limits water rate increases to no more than 3% without a vote of the people. So I suggest that you put that in there.
Right.
Okay.
And I think the other changes you've made make more sense, but obviously then in the summary, the second part of the summary, we have the measure would amend Section 58 of the Charter by raising the allowable annual percentage increase in water rates from 3% to no more than 6%, unless the increase is approved by the people or some language to that effect.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't write that down, but I think it's without voting of the people.
Without vote in
people
both
right there.
cases, right.
Well, they changed the top.
Well,
Paul, you're talking to the wrong person.
it's finance.
And I think then on the last sentence too,
The
that
same
was
thing.
Same thing.
Without a vote of the people.
Let's get
Let's get without the vote of the people there first, and
Yeah.
then we'll.
Yes,
Well-
we'll get to that.
Yeah, just without a vote.
Now he had a suggestion above earlier.
Yeah, it was better.
Take me away.
So, what he was talking about, I believe the first sentence, Section 58 of the Oregon City Charter limits increases in water rate to no more than 3%.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, it makes it simpler.
But you guys, I mean, this is kind of like making me feel like I'm micromanaging you. And I
Yeah,
don't want
this is not the
This is not
best
what
way
I,
to.
This
Right.
is not what I
Practice.
really want. I want to give you the intent of
Right.
what we
Yeah.
want and have you go wordsmith
Exactly.
it
Yeah,
personally.
that's fine. We went through this far anyway. My suggestion is this comes back to us. When's our deadline?
20th.
The
The next meeting, you could still do it to make the May ballot, but
Yeah.
it would be very tight for a challenge process.
Yeah. So we.
But as long as there wasn't a lot of challenge issues, it would be fine.
Well, maybe that's as much reason to try to get this fixed at this point. And so limits. We're
I guess
doing
it's-
away with the ability of the city and saying limits water rate increases to no more than 3% without a vote of the people. Did I get that right, Kevin?
Well, I think you guys should
Yeah, and then just
wordsmith it.
delete. Yeah.
The again, back to, is there anything that makes sense for the summary section to help explain I mean, if one of these passes and the other one doesn't,
Yeah.
where does that leave us? And I don't really
Well,
know.
then if I think in either you get a rollback and maybe 6%, or you don't get a rollback and you're at 3%.
But then we go back in November.
But is there anything in the summary statement that might
See, what I'm concerned about is it doesn't necessarily appear, I'm afraid, to the casual reader that you have a two-pronged problem here.
Yeah.
And that one of them is rates, the rollback issue, and the other one is your capital needs.
Yes.
And I don't know, I was asking the city attorney here a minute ago whether the summary could include some sentence that targets one of these toward the capital need and one of them toward the rollback. And if
Right.
there's a way that that can be delineated more clearly so that people aren't confused thinking, aren't these the same things?
We X'd out a lot of stuff here, so you got some words to play.
But I appreciate these suggestions because I think they're really good ones.
Yeah.
So you guys can kind of like
So
wordsmith it.
we probably are not going to take the action today. I can understand that some kind of link needs to be in there, and but I think we've eliminated so many words that you've got some space to play with.
Absolutely. And the water rate limitation is a pretty straightforward 3 to 6. Not much changes. The rollback's a little tougher to explain. We've got more room to do that, and the possibly explaining the link, if we can fit that in, would be a good option too.
Bill, on section 50, on the summary part of Exhibit A, where it says it contains 2 parts, now you only have to talk
Yep.
about the first part.
Yeah,
So
on
you've
both
saved a few words there.
Yeah, so we can it definitely give us more room.
Can we put, I mean, Tony's just suggested, maybe we've got a work session as well. Can we-
Oh, we could talk about it then, too.
We can certainly turn this around really quickly and get this to you for your
Okay.
work session,
That would
wordsmith
be great.
further.
That would be great. Yeah.
Because I think the first time we heard about it was
Yesterday.
relatively quickly, so we wanted to get something to you, but by no means a final product.
The 11th hour.
Coming to the question that you raised, what happens if one passes, one doesn't? I mean, I think I see what would happen, and it would be kind of double whammy. The point is, if one passes and the other doesn't, we have the opportunity to go back in November with maybe a clearer statement of why the other one was important.
Right. And more time to explain.
And more time to explain, right?
Hopefully you won't be in the situation
Yes.
where you roll them back to 94 rates and then start increasing it by 6% every year.
Well, that's the
That
other
won't-
scenario
that
that
won't
I had
fix
said before.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Right,
And
that's right.
that's a possible
That
scenario.
won't
as
fix our
well.
problem. We'll need more lawyers if that
Yeah,
happens.
that was my concern. That was my concern.
That's right.
I mean, if you remember, I don't remember the dollar amount. Maybe we pulled it, but with the rollback, that was a 27% rate increase,
Right.
and that was that would cripple our
Yes, it would, your operations.
operations.
So that's something to work with, and maybe the wording itself. I mean, maybe the wording in this particular ballot and the limitation rate can deal with that in some fashion, if you can think of a way to do it.
We'll take a look at we heard a number of things tonight, and from the commission and from the public. We'll take those back and hopefully get something a little better to you for your work session on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Do
Thank
we
you.
need a vote on the 6%, or are we just
Well, I think we've.
just going to go with it?
First of all, does anybody here object to the 6%? We'd like.
I was the only one that objected, and I'm fine with it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Good enough. So we can just proceed on then. All right.
And John, I have a campaign ready to go.
Good.
There's some kind of a campaign that used to be out about, ask me about my something or other. I don't remember what it was, but people wore buttons. We can just say, ask me about my rusty pipes.
That's good.
And have everybody in McLaughlin wear one.
Okay, now we're going into general business. Our City Commission biennial goals and priorities. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr.
Although
Mayor.
I think we're just supposed to know what our priorities are.
Since we spent 2 full days looking at them, I'm pretty sure you know what those are, but I think
we haven't got the nice booklet yet.
No, we haven't, and we haven't printed it yet because we want to make sure you approve it first, officially. And then after you've approved it, then we'll print up a nice booklet that'll be available to far and wide. The major change, there aren't major changes to the goals themselves, but I just want to tick through these for those of you who might not have been at the retreat. Goal 1 is to implement the economic development strategy and maintain an environment for success. And since the city recently updated its economic development strategy, we have a number of new milestones in there that we'll be working on. Goal 2 is to address critical facility needs. These include the library, public works, and trying to consolidate some of our city office spaces that are scattered out pretty much across the community into a more unified campus area. And trying to figure out where that location would be is important. Also, to continue conducting public polling, opinion polling on a new police station, to finish up at Ermatinger House, and work on the end of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center. Goal 3 is to enhance the livability of the community, and this includes milestones like the South End concept planning, Beaver Creek Road concept plan, the Willamette Falls site, the promenade, the elevator, police staffing issues, and the sign code. And then Goal 4 is to seek opportunities to maintain communications with citizens and facilitate citizen participation. I actually think the exercise we just went through is probably one of those that's sort of the high mark for citizen participation. But our milestone here is to revitalize the Arts Commission, perhaps, and review goals and implementation options in a work session this year. And then our final goal, 5, is to maintain the fiscal health and long-term stability of Oregon City. One of the first milestones under that goal is to address the water rollback issue, which we're doing here, and then look at parks maintenance costs and effective management of the city's rights-of-way. That right-of-way management milestone will be coming up fairly quickly. I think, Nancy, it's in March that we'll be looking at that. Yeah, so we're going to get a running start at several of these milestones. So those are the goals of the City Commission for the next 2 years.
Looks good. Thank you. So do we need to approve, or do we need a motion? What do we need?
We do have one citizen comment.
Oh.
Come on forward. Just a moment. I'll close my document and see who we are here.
I think you know who it is.
Hello, William.
Hello.
I haven't called you forward yet, you know. You're out of order.
I'm waiting.
William Gifford?
Good evening. My name is William Gifford. I live in Oregon City. And thanks very much. Good job for synthesizing all that hard work that was done at the retreat. There's one little niggly piece that just that concerns me, and that is under Goal 3. We talk about the South End concept planning process. That's good. And I'm comparing that to the Beaver Creek concept plan. The South End concept plan has the action word to implement the plan. Beaver Creek Road concept plan says complete the adoption process, blah, blah. It says nothing about implementing the plan. I think this is something that was raised regarding the Park Place concept plan.
Mm-hmm.
To have the plan is one thing. Implementing it is what it's all about. I think it was Eisenhower that said planning is...
So do you want us to rewrite the Beaver Creek concept plan, or do you want us to...
I'd like for you to include the word implement the plan. It says complete the adoption process for the Beaver Creek Road concept plan once all appeals have been addressed, and implement the plan, which you've got for the South End concept plan. Why wouldn't you have it for Beaver Creek?
I might be able to address that. We've already started the South End process, and I'm just going to guess, because Tony can actually tell us. Is the reason we don't have that language in there implemented because we don't think we can actually implement it in 2 years?
There are some concerns about where we're at in the court proceedings that are currently going on, that at the Court of Appeals, potentially going on further to that, and depending on what the Court of Appeals decision is concerning Metro's urban growth boundary decision as well as the urban and rural reserves decisions, it is potential to be a very timely process. And then we still need to come back, if all those appeals are successful and the city is successful, we need to come back, adopt the Beaver Creek concept plan, go through this appeal process potentially again, and then adopt the zoning code for that. So in 2 years, there's a lot of work to do.
Not to sound too pessimistic, which is not my style, but are we honestly assuming that there will be no such appeals for the South End concept plan? That is to say, the Beaver Creek concept plan was a Class A act, and it was done, and it was amazing. It was amazing, and we haven't even begun coming up with something that comprehensive for the South End, and yet we have the word to implement the South End plan. I'm just suggesting that there could be at least a tip of a hat, that there should be some intention of eventually implementing one of these plans.
I agree.
Yeah.
We're working on it.
I have a question. Under Goal 3, enhance the livability of the community. At the goal setting session, I talked about transportation and rethinking how we use the trolley and parking and all that kind of lumped into one, and I don't see that represented here.
I don't know why that isn't on here, actually. That should be.
Yeah, it should be.
So
Good catch.
we'll take this back and try to get that in there. I don't know what, I haven't talked to Katie, so I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
So do we need to take further action then at this
I
point?
think we should table it until we
Yeah.
can go back and look at that transportation element.
Do we need a motion to table?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Smith, seconded by Commissioner Munn. All in favor?
Except for
What happened? Where are you?
except for someone under pressed the button.
Just a minute.
Oh,
It disappeared.
But I don't know we're not doing. I know, but it's already pushed.
I was going to share my letter with you here.
Commissioner Polly.
Aye.
Commissioner Mum.
Aye.
Commissioner Roth.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Aye.
Mayor Neely.
Aye.
Motion passes to table.
Okay, going on now to the next agenda item. And that is from our police chief, police department, ODOT e-ticket grant.
Yes, and Lieutenant Jim Bann is going to give the staff report on this.
Are you okay?
I think so. Just kind of tough to get back here. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. We need approval to spend some money, but the majority of the money that we're going to be asking to spend is going to get repaid to us, and I'm going to explain it. There is a grant that we were awarded, and it's for what's essentially a software program, a ticket program. And I think the easiest way to explain it is when, and I didn't even think about it until I went to the presentation about this, when an officer writes a citation, if you think about what in your daily life do you write on that you have in triplicate still, it's just a thing of the past.
You're right.
A ticket is, there's 5 copies, and one copy goes obviously to somebody who's not always the happiest about getting their copy. One copy goes to essentially something the officer writes on. One copy goes to court, and what the court personnel do is they take that citation and they enter, and our staff figured out about 10 to 12 hours, depending on the month, that they take the information that's in the citation, put it into the computer, and there's 2 copies that our records keep, and they spend about 10 to 12 hours entering the same information and into a computer system, and then we have these paper that we store for a period of time and then shred and get rid of. Every year we purchase boxes of books of citations. So what this system essentially is, more than anything, is a software program. There's already computers in the cars, and the only hardware, and it's included in the purchase price of this grant, are these little thermal printers. And so essentially what happens, officers out, writes a citation or writes a warning. Rather than doing a handwritten form, there's just drop-down boxes, just like on any website. Essentially, that's kind of what it looks like. And the citation is printed. And then that citation, or you can do a warning, just the same. It's a lot faster. Is given to whoever was stopped. And then when the officer goes to clear the call, they hit send. And through the cloud, all the information from the citation is immediately put onto the computer system for us and the computer system for court. So there's at least 20 hours of staff time that we know of a week that is going to get eliminated, and we're not going to be purchasing these books of tickets that we're buying all the time. There are some costs, but I think the staff cost is a pretty big deal. It's a lot faster for our officers. It's also going to keep, when you think about, kind of like if you start with a secret on one end, or you whispered something in somebody's ear, the kids game and what it looks like by the end. You've got an officer who writes something down and then two different people entering things. There's just going to be errors, and the error rate that the people who have been utilizing this program is greatly reduced, which is great for everybody involved. Specifically, if you're getting a citation and you need communication, which goes through the mail, and you don't get it because an address was entered wrong. That can lead to people getting suspended licenses and things like that. That is a huge burden for them. One of the greatest benefits to it right now, when it comes to, our end game is not writing people tickets. Our end game is correcting behavior. And if you stop somebody, you have no idea whether or not they've ever been given warnings before. And this system also allows us to see, if you stop somebody, this person's never been written a ticket, they've never been getting a warning, never been stopped, so we can give them a warning, and hopefully that's going to alter their behavior. Likewise, if we see this person's been given 3 warnings, maybe it's time for something more memorable. It gives us the ability to do that, which is something that we don't do now. One of the things that's kind of relevant, one of the reasons I know that we were successful in getting this grant, one of the things they looked at were traffic stats. We've always known our traffic stats, but we've never really spent time until putting this stuff together for this grant, comparing our city and our crash stats to those of cities around us. And while we were waiting to see if we were going to get this grant, we started looking through this. I compared our injury crash stats and non-injury crash stats with other cities in the county, and nobody's even close. Right. And so I started looking at cities that were about our size, Kaiser, McMinnville. They weren't even close. Eventually, as I am going through the cities trying to find somebody, the city of Bend has statistics for, the worst one is the injury crashes, but they're about on par with us on non-injury. That was kind of our closest counterpart that I found, and that's a city with a population of just under 80,000, and we've got about 32,000. So as we're looking at increased efforts to fix that, because that's troubling statistic, we're going to have to get a lot more creative about that and addressing that problem. And so I think this is going to free up a lot of staff time for us to do so. The last thing that I will say is there was some information, I think, in your packet. Essentially, what we're asking, the amount has changed 3 times since I put the stuff that you've seen in your packet. What the grant is for is the purchase price of everything for us, for court, and the hardware is $73,246.39. So we have to spend that within 30 to 45 days. We will be reimbursed for everything except $10,000. So in the end, the city's going to spend $10,000 for $73,250 essentially worth of gear and software. And because we're part of a grant, it's a federal grant that ODOT is dispersing, and there's other people on this grant, so a lot of purchasing power. We're getting a pretty good deal for that too, or I should say ODOT's getting a good deal. So
run out and buy it tomorrow before the price goes up.
Yeah. What happens if you've got a printer that goes down in a car?
There is always going to be the option. Okay, so a couple things. One, because printer ink is ridiculously expensive. these printers use they're a thermal printer, which I didn't know existed.
Like old fax machines were thermal.
Okay. Well, so we're not going to run out of ink. But there is always a fallback. And for instance, there's certain times where officers aren't as comfortable, depending on who they're writing the citation to. They will always have the fallback of writing a hard citation if they need to, so they can still do that if that's the case. Hopefully that doesn't happen very often. I've heard the printers are bulletproof, but a salesman told me that. So.
Yeah. And if you want to give somebody something more memorable, how about a rose?
Yeah. We've yet to try that. I'm not sure how they take that.
The expense.
They're going to bury me.
Oh, sorry. I'm on the wrong thing. The expense for the software, is that something that's, is it permanent, or we renew that every so often, and is the funding for renewing that every year then?
Yes, it's...
is it, well, I'm assuming it's every year, but maybe it's not.
Yes. So this, the guy who's doing the grant actually negotiated the first 3 years for us. The original... He also negotiated what that was going to be. I think the first quote they gave us was after, so essentially the fourth year, we would have to start paying just over $7,000.
Okay.
But we have it worked down to just over, I believe, $5,000. And so...
So compared to the cost in terms of the, yeah. All right, great.
I have another question.
Go ahead. Sorry, Kelly.
Does that give you unlimited licenses in case you get something and end up with 10 more police cars or something?
That's another good question.
What it gets us is the biggest cost, and everything's broken down, it gives us 16 cars. We have 18 total cars. It puts it in 16 of them. The bulk, another big bulk of what the expense is the software that goes to our police records, and then another one that goes to the court. So once you get that in place, then down the road, if we need to add a car, it's a pretty nominal fee. The printers are $800 or $900 a piece, and then there's a couple $100, I think, per car. So it's the big expense is getting in the game. After that, we can add, for pretty nominal costs, we can add cars as we need for not too big of an expense.
Okay.
I think one of the main benefits of this is the cost of savings eventually to the city.
Yeah.
There's no duplication of data entry, and that means those 20 hours a week that staff is spending doing data entry, we can be doing something else with that staff.
Yep.
So that more than pays for the money that the city is going to spend during the life of these printers. So
great.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Very good.
So do we need to?
Yeah, we do need to approve the expenditure, I believe.
Okay.
And do I have a motion? I think the staff report gives us our recommendation, so
Oh, Betty
does somebody want to
Trying
read
to
the
find
recommendation?
We're not doing that,
We're
remember?
not doing.
Move to approve the purchase of the e-ticket program for the police department.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Commissioner Pauly,
Aye.
Commissioner Mum,
Aye.
Commissioner Roth,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Mayor Neely.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Very good.
Yay, go by. I love it.
And please, if I get stopped, I want a rose.
An E-Rose.
An E-rose, yeah.
I'm off again. Okay, with that, we're going on to
Faxes,
the
yeah.
final item under our general business. Ordinance number 13-1004, repayment of undercharged transportation system development charges and declaring an emergency. Mr. Conkle, I presume?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor and City Commissioners. So I bring before you tonight the request for an emergency ordinance to address the undercharging of transportation system charges on certain residential home building permits. On April 1st, 2009, the City Commission adopted Resolution 09-02, which created a new methodology for the city's transportation system development charges. It included a new rate, effective dates, and annual adjustments to that rate schedule. On December 5th, 2012, an error was identified that resulted in the initial tiered rates and the February 1st, 2011 increases to not be implemented correctly, resulting in the undercollection of the transportation system charges. The Resolution 0902 set up a three-tiered system of putting and charging transportation SDCs based on when a lot was recorded and or when a building permit was submitted on that lot. And the rates went up at, were different tiers, and they went up at different times. So looking back, once the error was identified on December 5th, 2012, we went back and identified and looked at all 671 residential permits that were issued between that April 1st, 2009 and December 5th, 2012, and we identified 172 permits for which a certificate of occupancy had already been issued. Essentially, the home's already been through the building permit process. We've done our final inspections and we've given them the certificate of occupancy. Those 172 permits totaled $495,337. We also had an additional 85 permits that had been issued a permit for construction, and they were in some stage of construction, whether that be picking up the permit or putting up the walls, putting on the roof, or nearing final, but they had not been issued a certificate of occupancy yet. Those 85 permits totaled $302,896. We've had some discussions about this in executive session. You've been made aware of what did occur. What I've done is I've worked with the applicants that have been impacted by this. There were 16 applicants that were impacted, and worked with them to address the permits, the 85 permits for which a certificate of occupancy has not been issued. In the staff report that I've provided to you, it lays out it provided the resolution 0902 as well as the settlement agreement, of which 11 of the 16 applicants that still have active permits have signed on to. The settlement agreement reiterates what's in the ordinance and clarifies exactly the same requirements, exactly what the ordinance says, that it would be applicable to all the applicants that are impacted by this. It also releases the city of all potential future liability associated with this. The program that we've come to an agreement on for these 85 active permits essentially sets up a repayment plan, two repayment options. One is that the applicant could come in and pay the outstanding transportation system development charge that's due with a 20% discount. Or they could elect to take a 2-year payment plan where essentially they would be paying the entire amount that's due over 2 years, and the city would charge 0% interest on that amount that's due. You're looking at about, on a single-family detached, approximately $5,000 per house. A little over $2,000 on the single-family attached house. This program also sets up an option for all the developers that were impacted by this, that they can, if this ordinance is adopted, it would create a new program where you can come in on a future house and defer your system development charges through the city, just like you can normally do. But instead of charging the standard rate that we apply, we would create a program where for 1 year, these impacted applicants could come in and defer their system development charges at a 2% rate for the first year of the 10-year deferment, and then the remaining 9 would be at the standard rate if they did not pay it off within that first year. The adoption of this ordinance would also codify the city's decision to not collect the undercharged total for the 172 permits that had already been issued the certificate of occupancy. And we are requesting that this be adopted as an emergency. We've been working with the applicants that have been impacted by this, but the sooner we can get this in place. Right now, they either need to come in and pay the total amount that's due, because that's what our code says, or they need to wait until we address this through the ordinance if some type of reduction or payment plan is going to be offered. So they're holding up their getting their C of Os to see what the commission's decision is on how to move forward with this. That does conclude my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
We've heard a great deal of this in executive session. Something was pointed out to me that I'd like to bring up. My understanding there, and I've talked to Mr. Conkle about it, and David Frazier, that there apparently are builders there that have a contract of sale, so they're committed to that sale. They don't have a certificate of occupancy. And my understanding is they wouldn't be covered in this case, and yet they've really had the same kind of essential costs that of a builder that has a house sold and has a certificate of occupancy. They really have incurred those same costs. And I wanted to give some thought to having it apply to the exemption apply to any case where you had contract of sale at the date that basically we discovered the problem and try to fix it to the best of our ability. And I'd like the commission to consider that. To me, it's a case like I'm buying a car and I purchase the car. I haven't driven off the lot yet because I haven't got my temporary permit to do so, and incurring the same cost there. So that's something I like the commission to take into consideration. I don't know how much work would have to be done on the ordinance to permit that to go forward, but I guess it's just a fairness issue from my standpoint.
Mayor Neely did talk to me a little bit about this last Friday, and we obviously thought about it a little bit before tonight. There would be a couple options that we've identified. One would be, yes, we could go back and set a date that says, okay, before this date, we found it on December 5th. We contacted everyone on December 6th. Before that date, we can work with our attorney to determine how do you determine what a legal contract was that the sale occurred, that you were in a binding contract, but you hadn't been issued a C of O yet. And I think that's the situation that you're concerned about. If we can identify that, we could set it up so that they would be treated the same as those who'd already been issued a C of O, where we would waive the undercharged SDC total. And I think there's a couple ways to do that. One is we could adopt the ordinance that you have in front of you tonight. You can direct me to go back and accomplish that and bring back another ordinance. The second option would be to try and amend it tonight at the dais, and we can read that in. And then the third option would be to table this, have me go back, work on it, and bring it back. Staff's preference would be the first one. Let's get this moving, and we can come back, and amend the ordinance to address those folks who are impacted. Because most of those folks who had C of Os or who had contracts already were probably closing and had to come in and pay the full amount already. The one part I do need to clarify, I don't know how many applicants it impacts, how many building permits it impacts, and what the financial impact of that is. But I'm assuming that out of fairness, we're willing to move that forward regardless of what that number is.
I have a question about, down here on the second page, it talks about 11 of the 16 impacted applicants have signed the settlement agreement. What's our anticipation for the other 5?
I have
what's the holdup on the other?
I have one that has indicated that after the ordinance is adopted, he'd have no problem signing it. I have one person who indicated, they're going to utilize the program. It's just easier for them not to sign it. They have $6,000 over 3 houses because they're attached homes. They just weren't interested in signing it because of the multiple partners associated in the development. The other 3, one is having some issues bank owned, so we've been trying to track them down. The other 2 we've been in contact with, and they weren't against it. They just weren't willing to sign at this time.
Mayor, if I might, there's somebody in the audience. Somebody in the audience.
Let's have our kind of internal discussion.
Well,
first.
I'm a little bit concerned about this incident has held up the closure and the dealing with these issues, and potentially people that have money at risk in investments in the community not knowing the extent of their liabilities. And I think the quicker we can deal with that and give them some closure and some clarity moving forward, the better. And then regarding the second one, I think it merits some closer study, not only because we want to find out for sure how many we're talking about. We also I have some concerns that we don't want to set up an incentive for people to suddenly have contracts that they didn't realize they had before. Not saying that could happen, but I want to make sure that we can verify that those contracts actually existed before our mistake, was widely known.
Yeah, I can understand that concern. It's just I mean, I don't really see the distinction from the two, other than the certificate of occupancy. So they all have the same potential losses.
The amounts would be the same. It's just that the verification process for us, the CFO, is very easy to verify.
Yeah.
Somebody else's contracts might be more difficult, but we're certainly willing to work on that.
Okay. Yeah, any other comments before I open it up to the public?
No.
Mr. Hunt.
Mr. Mayor, Commission, my name is Kevin Hutt. I live in Oregon City. Many of the remarks I would have made have now been rendered moot, and I'm satisfied that there's a basis, and I understand now why it's deemed necessary to proceed as an emergency ordinance. I was going to question that. However, I do still have some concerns that are related to that, and I hope you'll understand that many of the things I'm going to say now don't represent my personal viewpoint at all. But I think it's important that we acknowledge the kinds of unfortunate rumors that are circulating through the community and questions. And these questions and rumors are allowed to propagate because of what people perceive to be a shroud of secrecy over this matter. And part of the reason for that shroud of secrecy is the refusal to disclose the report by the Local Government Personnel Institute. There may be good reasons why that isn't being disclosed, but it hasn't been explained. Certainly the law indicates that if personnel matters are required, disclosure, it can be exempt from disclosure. However, that's not an absolute rule. The statute also says unless the public interest requires disclosure. I would submit that when we're talking about a failure to collect $798,233, that the public interest does require that this matter be fully explained. I do want to commend Mr. Conkle for the degree to which he disclosed a lot of information that wasn't previously disclosed in his staff memorandum. That was very helpful to read. However, these are the kinds of questions, again, these aren't my views, but these are the kind of questions that are circulating in the community. Questions such as, quote, well, what did these guys get in return for not assessing these fees on these developers? That's the kind of very unhelpful and unfortunate allegation of essentially of corruption that tends to circulate when there's a shroud of secrecy over things, and is so unnecessary. There's also a rather large section of the segment of the community that looks at the fact that longstanding members of staff often will retire after nominating themselves for awards, which they happen to win, but then they leave messes, and there's people who are asking, what does it take in order for a staff person or administrator to be disciplined or terminated? These are the kinds of questions people have, and I would submit that the sooner you get out front with this, the better off you're going to be, and we're still looking at a loss of what was it, $302,896, or was it $495,337? One of those two amounts, I can't remember which one. This is a serious matter. There's a lot of people who just don't buy the fact that it was a computer programming error. I have no opinion on that. But the sooner you put that to rest, the better. And you can put that to rest by ordering the release of the Local Government Personnel Institute report. And I encourage you to do that. It's my understanding Mr. Mays requested it, and it was declined. Apparently, the Oregonian isn't seeing fit to pursue that any further. I don't know. Maybe Mr. Mays will address that, but somebody I think needs to ask that you do that, and I think that it will. It's a painful issue, I understand, but for the good of the community and the public interest, I submit that you need to get out front on this and just let the facts air. Thank you.
I think we'll just let David Frazier discuss to what degree he can about the investigation that did occur.
Well, the LGPI report that Mr. Hunt's referring to is completed, and we've been acting on the advice of our attorney not to release it because we haven't finalized the discipline of the various employees that might be affected by it. Also, several of those people no longer work for the city, and I've been advised by our attorney that we have to notify them and give them an opportunity to object to the release of the report. So that's a process that we're following, and if the commission, I'll probably will bring that to the commission and ask whether you want to release it, but I would have that discussion with you in executive session with your attorney.
Yeah, I think I can make this comment, and somebody can tell me to shut up if I'm going too far. A person discovered the error. It immediately got reported to Mr. Conkle. Mr. Conkle immediately reported it to David Frazier. David Frazier immediately called us in, and we were made aware of it immediately. It was something that was not caught on audit. The person that made the mistake discovered it and admitted the mistake, and I think that much I probably could say.
You've said, I won't go any further, but the report has some information, but I think out of respect for the personnel process and the union contract that you have and some other issues, we need to let the process run its course, and then once that's run its course, we can look at the investigation. And I know the commission's interested in transparency, and we can follow through on that.
Okay, Mr. Nacita, then Ms. Ross, then Ms. Mum.
Mayor James Nacita, Oregon City. Mr. Hunt mentioned most of the stuff I was going to mention. I was too concerned that what's going on, I think, requires leadership on the Commission's part to be transparent and to disclose that report proactively and affirmatively. Reiterating what Mr. Hunt said, the exemption for a document like this, there is one in the Public Records Act. It's Section 12 of ORS 192.501, personnel discipline action or materials or documents supporting that action. However, the introductory clause of that Section 501 is conditionally exempt documents that can only be withheld if it's in the public interest to do so, and it's kind of a balancing factor there. And I think in this instance, given what's happened and the need for accountability, that the public interest really weighs in support of disclosure. Not sure about what I've heard from staff here, because I don't think it's a question under the statute of waiting till the process has concluded, because the statute doesn't say that. It says it's exempt unless it's the public interest, and there's no timing question in the statute. Another issue is that in ORS 192.505, the city is required to separate out exempt from non-exempt materials. I mean, it's supposed to be construed narrowly, and the emphasis is always supposed to be on disclosure. I don't know the contents of the report, but having litigated Public Records Act matters, I'm sure that there are purely factual materials in there that are completely exempt or non-exempt from disclosure, and that any exempt materials relating to discipline or anything like that could be redacted out. But the law does affirmatively require the city to exempt, non-exempt, separate out non-exempt and exempt material. The city has precedents for waiving privileges. It's done it before, and I would urge this commission to take a leadership role on behalf of the citizens, and require that report be disclosed, waive any privileges, and be upfront with the citizens here about what went on in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to make any comment, Mr. Beisman?
Yeah, I guess what I'd say is Ms. Nacita is correct that there is that provision to require to separate out the exempt from non-exempt. But what I think the most important thing at this point is that the exemption applies to material, the personnel discipline and materials and documents supporting that. And what we're looking at is what the city's looking at is disciplining various members and those various the discussion of those people who are no longer employees supports the discipline of the employees or what happens with the employees. And so this is all part of a document that's dealing with the discipline of supporting the discipline of the employee. Mr. Nacita also referenced the idea that there's no timing in the exemption. That's also correct. However, the Attorney General's manual, which is looked on as sort of an authoritative view of those documents, does have a significant discussion about those periods while discipline is being considered, and that even if it doesn't, it's difficult to tell what should be exempt while the investigation is going on. After the discipline is complete, we can reevaluate, and in all likelihood, I think my recommendation would be to release it. But until the discipline is complete, it's hard to really look at it in that way. And I think that's supported by the AG's manual.
Commissioner Roth.
Well, I had two things I want to say. David, you said that you could probably bring it back to us. I'd like you to amend that to mean you will bring it back to us.
Well, I'm planning to bring it back to you in executive session.
Yeah. Okay, but you said probably, and I don't want to probably. The second thing is I think we should move forward quickly on getting releases from former employees, not let that drag out.
And just to make it clear, we don't necessarily need releases, but there have been a number of court cases, not a number, there's been one court case where the court has implied that a person whose information is part of an exempt, if there's damaging information about a person who is could claim an exemption, that person should be given the opportunity to claim the exemption. So essentially, if we were to lease it and a former employee said, "Wait a second, you never should have released it. I should have been given an opportunity to object to the release." We want to make sure they have the opportunity to do that. So we don't need releases. We just need to give them the opportunity to take
that
actions.
be done quickly?
Yes.
Commissioner Mumm.
Oh, rumors. I love rumors. So this is what I do when I get a rumor. I take it right to the source. I've done that with many of you in this room. I've been accused myself of being corrupt and in the pocket of. And, it's really good if you know of something being said in this community, take it to one of us or to Mr. Frazier. And let's get it resolved. Let's hit it right on. I don't think anyone here is trying to hide any documentation. I think that it will be released in its time. It may not be in the time that you want, but it will be released when it is time to be released, which will be soon. That is something we're working on. And I do want to bring back to the ordinance that we're looking at for tonight and see if we can focus on that and get that passed.
Therefore, we're ready for a decision. Does anybody have difficulty with having that passing of this emergency ordinance? Of course, it has to be all of us voting for it in the affirmative, if it does, to have it coming in with a possible amendment dealing with the issue. It's fine. I hear a motion.
Move to approve number 13-1004, repayment of undercharged transportation system development
And calling
charges
for
and
a-
declaring an emergency.
The first reading?
Second.
Yes.
First reading. Yeah.
Second. Second
Oh.
the motion. Second
Sorry, I
the
thought you
motion.
were saying
But
second.
Carol already beat me to it, so.
Okay. So ordinance number 13-1004, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City amending Chapter 13.20 of the Oregon City Municipal Code relating to repayment of undercharged transportation system development charges, declaring an emergency.
Roll call?
Commissioner Pauly?
Aye.
Commissioner Mum?
Aye.
Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Neely?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Motion for second reading?
Move to approve second reading and final adoption of number 13-1004, repayment of undercharged SDCs and declare an emergency.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Mum, seconded by Commissioner Smith.
Ordinance number 13-1004, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City amending Chapter 13.20 of the Oregon City Municipal Code relating to repayment of undercharged transportation systems development charges, declaring an emergency.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Pauly?
Aye.
Commissioner Mum?
Aye.
Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Neely?
Aye.
Motion passes. Ordinance adopted.
Move the consent agenda?
Mayor, before you go into the consent agenda, the city recorder was kind enough to forward to me the minutes from our retreat, and I have an explanation to Commissioner Pauly's earlier question about the goals, so you may want to go back to those after I explain this and approve them. At 2:45 p.m., there was a summary provided by our consultant that was at the retreat, and the commission agreed that we would have a work session on the trolley issue and the transportation issue together, and that was not necessarily required to be a goal because it's going to go into your work plan. It's already on our schedule, actually. So it wasn't deemed to be a milestone among the goals, but it's certainly going to get done.
Okay, I just want to make sure it's on the radar. Yeah.
Okay, so with that, could we go back to that item and get your
Yes,
goals?
let's go ahead and do so.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Carol. Bringing that up.
Motion to approve the goals.
Okay. Motion to approve the goals. Do I need a?
I second.
Can I just interrupt? Sorry, real
Yes.
quick. We had the one comment about implementation on South End. Did you
Right.
want to
Oh.
talk
Right.
through that a little bit more? Or
Right.
did you want to?
Well, it's in the courts,
It is.
and at this point, we don't know whether we can implement it. Is that the case?
That's the case. I think there's a little bit of difference too in that when you look at the actual language for South, you were going to adopt
South
the
End's
South
language,
End the code to implement it. So we're adopting the code to implement the plan. We still got to adopt the Beaver Creek concept
Right.
plan.
Right.
We can certainly add.
I
whatever
wish to
words
assure William Gifford that I am all about getting our Beaver Creek concept plan
Yes.
moving.
Yes.
But at this, I'm all about getting that Beaver concept plan moving
Beaver
again.
concept.
But right at the moment, it is out of our hands, and it has been for some time. So the motion still stands.
Yes.
Second still stands.
Yes.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Pauly? Aye. Commissioner Mum?
Aye.
Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Neely?
Aye.
Motion passes.
With that, we can go on to the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
Second.
Okay, it looks like Betty has yielded her motion and taken the second.
You did a really
Okay.
good job of simultaneously saying that.
Who was the second?
I
Second was
second.
Betty.
Kathy was
Kathy
first.
was the motioner.
Oh, okay.
Mover. Kathy's a mover. Anyway, the roll call, please.
Commissioner Pauly?
Aye.
Commissioner Mum?
Aye.
Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Neely?
Aye.
Motion passes.
And that puts us in the position of listening to our city manager, I believe.
Very short report tonight, Your Honor, given I already revealed two of my items in your last commission meeting with the URC. But I'm really pleased to announce tonight that the city has a new operations manager. And
He's gotta be in here
John
first,
Lewis
sorry.
is going to introduce our new operations manager.
So, real quickly, he's been sitting through the entire meeting. So
I noticed. I wondered who that was back there.
Martin Montalvo is our. He started on February 1st, so Friday. He's been here 4 days, I guess now, and he comes to us from the state of Florida. He is accomplished. He ran a very big operations group for county in Florida, Hillsborough County, and I can't tell you how excited we are to have him here. He's got a lot of experience. He's got some strong emergency background experience, which will be nice. He's done some amazing things. If you Google Martin Montalvo, you'll even see him flying over. Mapping. I checked you out a little. That event was refresh my memory.
Deepwater Horizon.
Deepwater Horizon. So he does have a slight imperfection. He's not an engineer, so can't be perfect.
That could be a good thing.
Could be, yeah.
He is a biologist.
He's better than perfect.
There you go. So anyway, yeah, just welcome him, and
welcome.
It's gonna take him a little while to figure out town, but before he even started, he'd pretty much spent a lot of time looking at stormwater facilities in Oregon City. So, yeah, it's nice to have him. Thank you for being
Glad to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
We're glad to have you.
I'm sure our stormwater issues will be minuscule compared to what you had in Florida.
The duration is a little bit different.
Yeah.
We get it across 6 months. We get it in 2 or 3 after. Again, I'm happy to be here. The wife and I are ecstatic about the opportunity.
Well, we're very pleased to have you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's all. Nice.
I do have a couple of items. I'm going to relate them slightly, but Metro is proceeding to have Metro regional government is proceeding to have a levy put on the May ballot for maintenance of the open spaces that they procured. They had passed by solid majorities bonds to actually make the procurements, but I think most of us who know what the situation there is, there are issues of invasive species and so forth, and so they are seeking a levy. There are issues associated with levies that they fall under the same caps that we do, the $10 cap that all of the school districts under a separate cap, but all other entities are on the $10 cap, and under compression, the first victims of it are special levies. I don't think we've had too much of a problem with compression yet, and maybe with the housing market changing, maybe that won't be that much of an issue. I had signed a letter expressing concern about that particular issue, but I personally am going to go ahead and support that levy because I think it's very important. Earlier, since our last city commission, I wrote a memo to Metro staff, appropriate Metro staff, mentioning. First of all, before I do that, an announcement. We had Metro made a procurement of a piece of property in the Kenema Bluffs area to complete their Kenema purchase, and so it's a continuous block of land of 330 acres. At this point, the procurements in Newell Creek are 280, so we have two substantial open space purchases, part of which are within our city. I wrote the Metro staff during that period of construction along the ridges and so forth. Many developers donated land to the city that they could not develop. It's all in steep slopes and wetland areas that could not be developed, and of course we're not in a position to take care of it. And I wrote to Metro staff to see if whether they would be willing to consider taking the property immediately adjacent to the Newell Creek Canyon and including it as part of their open spaces and assuming the responsibility in the process for it. They've responded they would be interested. They wouldn't want to enter any such discussions until summer. And I then informed both David Frazier and Scott Archer of that. And so that's something that we might want to pursue. These are lands that cannot be developed and are probably to the degree we maintain them, are probably a burden to our budget. So those are the things I wanted to report. Anybody else?
Okay, well, I have a few things. I got a call from an elk who's a member of the Oregon City Elks Club.
Okay.
How's that for a segue? They are expecting between 300 and 400 people in Oregon City. I think it's the last week, April of 2014. I'm going to have them talk with Scott because they want to go through the interpretive center. And, you know, kind of, they want to know if the city wants to, like, put information in a packet to give to the visitors that will be coming from all over the state. And the reason why they're coming is because the Oregon City Elks person is going to be the president elk or something of all, I don't know, elk structure very well, but he's going to be the president of the state. So they're all coming to Oregon City to do his celebration. So more information to come. I attended, as well as Commissioner Pauley and Mayor Neely and David Frazier, the Clackamas City dinners, and the speaker was Michael Jordan. Is that correct? He works for the state. He gave us a lot of good state information, talking about breaking down the silos at the state and getting everybody to kind of come together and be at the table and talk about things. So that was very informational and very good. Amber Holbeck, director of Oregon City Chamber, was here and spoke to Mike. I was going to say I attended the chamber dinner, as many of you did, and we are going to sorely miss Mike's passing. I also wanted to let everybody know that Kathy, Commissioner Roth, and I met about the water rate rollback. And we're going to be working on a campaign to kind of hit the trail with, to get the public word out, do some door knocking. So Commissioner Roth and I will be working together to do that. And then I was watching the Citizen Involvement Council on Granicus and wanted to know if that is also on cable access. Do you know if that is on cable access? I think I would really encourage us to get it on there because not everybody has the computer and not everybody watches Granicus or can get to the video. So I would really encourage that at least the Citizen Involvement Council be put on cable access for those people that are awake at 2 or 3 in the morning and have nothing else to do. So then they can email us and tell us their ideas. So that was the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Yeah, just real quick, a little update on Main Street since I'm the representative from the commission for that. Part of the program that the new staff member, Ethan Erickson, is implementing are downtown discussions, and I'm particularly excited about them because it works towards goal number 4 to seek opportunities to maintain communications with citizens and facilitate citizen participation. Boy, it's getting late, huh? And so this week they're happening on Wednesday, or next week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at 9 a.m., and he's splitting them up into blocks. So he'll do the businesses from 5th to 7th on one day, the businesses from 7th to 11th on one day, and 11th to 15th on another day. And I think that's great. It's going to build a partnership with businesses in similar areas that have certain needs, and I'm going to try to attend as many as I can.
Great.
So, sounds good.
That's good. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I want to talk about attending the North Clackamas State of the Cities luncheon with Doug, and Doug did a very nice job. I would not have wanted to be the mayor of Damascus at that. That was something to see. The other thing I wanted to talk about is Rocky and I attended the inauguration, and we had the opportunity. Tony put together a packet for us about the Blue Heron site, and the Natural Resources Committee, some of their members, put together a packet about the Gladstone trolley bridge that's failing. And we had the...
You got through with yours? And
I got through with my
Oh,
packet.
stop. Remember what I told you. Okay, remember.
Anyway, we got the packets through.
Security was not so friendly to myself.
They thought you were
It was very strong.
Yeah. So we got the packets through to Senator Merkley and Senator Wyden. And I was going to kind of tag on to what David said about movement on the railroad, because it seems very fortuitous that all of a sudden the railroad's interested in looking at something that quickly after we made the attempt. So, and they were all very, very excited about the Rockies thing.
It's not my thing. It's it's a little broader than me, I think. She's talking about the Willamette Falls project. Yeah, that's not just my thing.
At that point, it was.
And I have some things to share as well about my friend here. I spent 4 days. We had a blast. We had a good time, and I wish I would have been able to stay longer in D.C. It was pretty incredible, and very cold. And we were walking out of a restaurant about a block from the White House, and walked outside, and I hear, "Rocky, Rocky!" So I ran into students on the street. I don't know why they were. I went to my students. It happens everywhere. In fact, TSA people were students too, so it's crazy. And speaking of another past student, I wanted to report that I talked to Dave about this today. It's neat to see kind of this connection and interest from some of the other colleges in helping with projects or visioning projects and various things. So one of my former students is at the College of Law, Willamette University, and they're all kind of assigned to take on certain projects, and they showed her and two friends that are also in the program have showed interest in helping with the Ermatinger House project. And so I met with them to discuss the possible ways, Scott, you want to hear this, possible ways that these three from Willamette University could help with the Ermatinger project. And so I just met with them briefly to kind of tell them where we've been and the process of leading up to where we are at with the Ermatinger House. And these three are definitely wanting to kind of help contribute in helping the city in the next phase of that, whether it's helping fill that gap or find the money to fill the gap that we still have, or maybe even starting to tackle the discussion of how we move forward with some progression on national parks if we decide that's something that we want to see in the future. So I'm going to make sure I have them contact you and set up a meeting so that they can kind of get an idea of where the city is at and where they might be able to fit in and helping move that forward a little bit more too. So I think that's it.
A couple more things. When I found out Commissioner Smith was going to the inauguration, I made one simple request of him, and that was to be sure to give Michelle a kiss for me. And he
maybe that was the problem. Thanks a lot.
Well, the other thing I wanted to mention was My understanding is that people in Oregon City are planning a memorial for service for Mike McCarroll here. So those who are interested, kind of keep your ear open. Something I think we'll be happy to hear.
Great. Thank you.
Anything
Yeah,
else?
yeah.
Yes.
One more thing. Kathy mentioned Blue Heron, and that reminded me. I forgot about
that's
Blue
right.
Heron. So we, the city, and state parks, and our state rep, and many other people attended a tour of Blue Heron. And I just wanted to pass along a comment that I had towards the city that was very wonderful. There was some pleasant surprise how well and capable the city staff and commission is to handle such a big project like this. And just the interaction along the whole way, the process.
Well, it's
How
because it's my
pleased-
project. That's part of
Rocky's got to go. It was just great to hear that comment, and just everybody being really pleased with how it's going.
Thank you.
Well, Mayor, I had one correction to make, and I understand when Commissioner Roth, you said make sure you bring that back to us. The reason I said I may bring it back is because the presumption is that you can release records. Yeah, the manager can release them.
I see. Okay.
And rather than presume that I'm going to release them, as I often do in most cases, because I think we have some liability here, I want the commission to be comfortable with the exposure. And I hadn't talked to the city
Potential
attorney.
liability.
Potential liability, yes, thank you. That's why I said may. It wasn't because I was presuming I wouldn't. It was actually, I would normally do release these things, but because it's a bigger topic, I wanted to make sure.
Thank you.
So thank you for bringing it up.
Do we have a meeting?
Can I say one last thing about the water rate thing? We've been working on an infomercial. What Willamette Falls Television is actually. So Melody Ashford and her group have done an outstanding job with a 8-minute infomercial, and so I just wanted to let you know and let the viewing public. It'll be on Comcast Channel 23, and there's some other channel 111, channel 111. I don't get these channels, so I don't understand this. But anyway, it'll show Wednesdays at 10 a.m. and 8:45 p.m. Thursdays 2:20 a.m. Fridays 4:45 p.m. and 8:50 p.m.
It's actually really well done.
It is very well done.
I saw a preview of it, and the Secretary of State's office has had a large staff change down there, pretty much wholesale staff change, and they've started approaching this differently. Now they're agreeing to review materials in advance and give you what's called a safe harbor sign-off, basically. So just for the council's own comfort, you should know that everything we communicate on this project is going through the city attorney and through the Secretary of State's office for that safe harbor, including the mayor's got an article coming out. So apparently their idea of what's advocating is now much more confined to what seems like a more realistic view. So we have been getting approvals for things that I think 2 or 3 years ago they would not have approved.
Is that video online as well somewhere, or will they be?
It will be. It'll be on the website.
On our website?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know that we got it today, but we're planning to.
Great.
So it's very much aligned with the information.
I
we've
watched
already
the
been
toilet
showing.
one, the flushing one.
You did? Good
Yeah.
for you. Yeah.
It was it was
Did
great.
you watch it in class? Did your students?
No.
So we have executive
They spend an incredible amount of time in the restroom, though, however, so that might be not a bad idea.
For the good of the order, is there anything else? We are not having an executive session.
We don't.
I thought we have to continue.
No, the item actually came up at the commission meeting here. So
There are a couple of other
There's other-
items that we need to discuss.
Oh, is there?
Uh-huh.
Oh,
Yeah, we
never
weren't
mind.
done.
We are now adjourning to executive session. My apologies.